All right, good evening, fellow Protectors. Welcome to Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. I'm Greg LeBuff here with you. I got Dustin with us this week and Coach Brad. They're both here. You got the whole gang. And listen, tonight's episode. This is actually of the Education of a Weaponized Man. This is our episode. This is our 87th episode. And so I wanted to tie that number in for no other reason than I fucking felt like doing that. So tonight's episode is titled How Street Fighting Shifted the World's Dynamic. And I'm going to tell you how that ties into the number 87 when we're back in 30 seconds. Hang with us. Hey everybody, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Greg LeBuff, and I'm sharing insights for how I went from the violent criminal assault and how for the past 30 years, I've been helping good people just like you do the same. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, we're back. Okay, like I said, this is our 87th episode, and I wanted to tie it in a weird way, and it just happened to work out this way. So I said that the title of this episode is How Street Fighting Shifted the World's Dynamic. And how that ties into the number 87 is in 1987 is when the video game Street Fighter hit the market. And many people, well, maybe people know this. I actually didn't know this, but in 1987 when Street Fighter came out, it was the most successful game since kind of the golden era of video games. You know what I mean? So like when fucking Pong and all that kind of shit came out, Street Fighter revolutionized the video game industry. And Street Fighter was launched in 1987. Now, just in case, I'm not a video game guy. I mean, obviously when I played Street Fighter and I've played video games, but I'm by no means a video game guy or an expert on this. But just in case somebody listening is that, I'm going to get emails on this. So I'm going to say, in 1987, when Street Fighter, the original game, was launched, it was actually Street Fighter 2, so the second iteration of that game, that really blew up. I mean, massively blew up. Okay, so just to be factually correct here, it was Street Fighter 2 that really revolutionized and changed the world dynamic. But here's what I thought would be interesting to do today. There's a deeper concept, obviously, behind this. We're not going to break down the video game. But how did it change the world's dynamic? And this is what's interesting. Okay, so this video game, which is global, right? Becomes a massive fucking success. That means that you have millions of people seeing this game, knowing about this game, playing this game, all that kind of stuff. Well, what happens is when you have something that is that prolific, something that permeates, millions of people, regardless of age, race, gender, within reason, obviously, right? But you just have so many different sets of eyeballs on this thing that, these cultural phenomenons, they become like a paradigm, and paradigms become people's beliefs. Like they form a perception in people, whether they know it or whether they don't. And so here's kind of my connection to this. You have a video game, and how this video game revolutionizes, because prior to Street Fighter, video games were played where the person playing went for the high score. They went to achieve personal best. So if you couldn't be the guy in the arcade that had your name in the top 3, let's say, of the best scores, the highest scores, you had a personal best. You're like, okay, I made it this far, I made it that far, whatever it is, I collected this many gold coins, whatever. When Street Fighter came out, it switched it. And it switched it to head-to-head competition. Now, if you think about that for a second, for those that follow us and kind of understand the educational process that we try to share with people, if you have a mass amount of people, a global paradigm where people are now switched into this head-to-head combat mode, okay, you say it's just a fucking video game, and I'm not talking about do video games desensitize us to violence and all this shit. I'm not going down that correlation. What I'm just saying is that it becomes this thing inside of us where you're rewarded to fight head to head, to compete head to head. Now listen, there's been many examples in our world. Almost every single sport involves some sort of head to head competition. Hockey team plays a team, you get head to head. But all of a sudden, you've got this in the fighting world, and it's global, right? And so if you look at this, and back in 1987, I was kickboxing. Okay, so, I remember Street Fighter coming out, And I want to just give people a timeline. In 1987, I was kickboxing. By 1993 to 94, I had started to have the shift because that was when I had my violent assault. By late 94, 95, I was into the world of weaponizing. And so where this parallels for me is that when I started the what we call the weaponizing program, but when I started in 1994, 93, it was actually called Street Fighting Concepts, right? Like my instructor, Paul Vunick, was teaching Jeet Kune Do street fighting concepts, not Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's art. Like it's, yes, he was trained by Dan Inosanto, so there's the lineage there, but he was teaching JKD concepts. And so there's a whole history and a parallel here, but I found this really interesting because when I started, so you got this street fighting, and this is the thing. I could have titled this From Street Fighter to Combat Specialist. And what I would like to share with people is this evolution of why and how things changed. And I thought it's such a neat correlation that, you know, this Street Fighter video game came out in 1987 and the second iteration, and I don't know exactly when the second version came out, but I would assume it had to be at least a couple years after the original. So now you're into, you know, 88, 89, let's say somewhere in there. And this is like, again, I'm starting in 93, 94, and then really deep into it in 95, and it was street fighting concepts. So street fighting was this thing. And I got maybe a couple questions to start off with. One is, you guys remember, because my first, I was the conduit. So, you know, as I was training and learning and growing, I was sharing and teaching. And so I guarantee you guys probably still got some old T-shirts that say Street Fighting Concepts on it. And you would remember the vernacular, and you would remember I love the term context determines content. So you would remember that our early days, the context was around street fighting. And so I guess my first question would be, how well do you guys remember that era? And just, I don't want to jump too far ahead yet, but what do you remember the focus being on the street fighting concept days? And we'll kind of start from there, I guess.
The first thing I gotta say, because the timing of this is kind of interesting, because I was at a conference for work 2 months ago, and I ran into a guy I haven't seen in 20 years, and he saw me right away, and he looks over and he's like, "Hey, Dustin," it's like, "How's it going? Are you still street fighting?" It's like literally the first thing he asked me in 20 years. Like, but because it was right from that era, like when I knew him, we were in that era of everything was street fighting concepts. So yeah, it's funny because I actually hadn't, heard her use that term in a really long time, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just funny that like that just happened, and then now you're bringing it up too. So yeah, of course I remember it for sure because that's what we lived in at the time, right?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's a great story, right? Brad, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely remember the street fighting concept days. That was a long time ago. You know what? I think it's really hard to pinpoint. Like, I would have to take a second to be like, okay, what do I actually remember from the concept side of things? Because, like, the root fundamental, protecting yourself, defending yourself against violence, has always been there. And I think that, like, there's been some evolutions. There's been some upgrades definitely in terms of terminology, right? Because even look at street fighting. Like, we don't say street fighting anymore because it doesn't articulate everything that we're talking about with weaponized. That's why we say weaponized, right? So the terminology is definitely something that I know that is improved, right? But the overall, you're just a man trying to survive deadly force encounter, an assault, violence, however we put it back in the day, is still what we are. We're still men, women, looking to protect and defend against violence.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
the way we say it's changed, but it's still what we're about. 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Brad. I think, you look back to those days and it's like, as Brad said, the root the root was the same. The goal was the same, even though it was maybe said with different words and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's kind of like my comparison to be like, well, if we were in kindergarten then, it was like kindergarten level, and I mean more my level of understanding, my ability to really truly understand the context and the problem of what violence was, and I think that's a large part of why the vocabulary, the terminology, all had to change. And part of it too is probably just an age thing, where I was in my life, in my own personal development, my ability to be able to actually go deeper into the concepts, because it's not like those have changed, and yet it feels like they have, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like it was always there. But yeah, I think for all of us, even you teaching it, probably, I'm sure you feel like you can teach at a PhD level now compared to what you were doing 20, 25 years ago, right?
Yeah. I totally get what you guys are saying, and I definitely get what you guys mean. I am going to. I think this will be interesting for you guys because I want to share something that I think will change your perception a little bit. But again, I get the meaning of it. But I'm trying to think of the best way to do this quickly, and I think let me share something about Paul, like my instructor Paul Vunick. Let me share something about his journey that I think reflects this, and then there'll be a better jump off point for our evolution, or my evolution and our evolution. If you look back, right, Paul Vunick was trained under Guru Dan Inosanto, and just a real quick synopsis. I'm not going to do justice to his full career because I mean the man's had an amazing career with lots of depth to it. But just as an overview, if you look, there is like Jeet Kune Do that Bruce Lee created, but there was also that came out of the Jin Fan Gung Fu, right? And Bruce had originally named it after was Jin Fan, his Chinese name, and there was Jin Fan Gung Fu, and then it became JKD, and then when Bruce passed away, and this was even prior to Bruce's passing, but then after his passing, there became more of a concept called, or sorry, a tag named Jeet Kune Do Concepts. So if you think you have this like Jun Fan Gung Fu, JKD Concepts, and those are different iterations. So you could look at it and say, well, that's like you called it street fighting, then you called it something different, because things change, things evolve. So just as a very loose comparison to this, it's like, why did the Jin Fan Gung Fu change? Because you learn, you grow, you adapt, you evolve, and so JKD, Jeet Kune Do. Then you get this Jeet Kune Do Concepts, and there was at the time this and might still exist to a degree, but when Bruce passed, Dan Inosanto brought in arts like Kali and different aspects of arts that he was training. And so originally there was 27 or 28 original martial arts that made up, not eclectically, but different pieces that were brought together that Bruce created this system, right? And that was Jeet Kune Do Concepts. And then, Dan had introduced Bruce to Filipino arts with sticks and different things and stuff like that. But it didn't integrate the same way because then Bruce had passed away. And so there used to be this big argument that Dan was bastardizing the art, like watering it down, changing it, because there's always going to be people that just are like historians. I want it the original way he taught it and with nothing else, blah, blah, blah. But Dan was part of Bruce's journey. They were creating the Jeet Kune Do and the concepts together, right? Like they were a part. They were partners. They're friends. They were, there's interactions in training, And so the argument I remember Paul used to make all the time is people would push back against the Jeet Kune Do concepts and say, no, it's not pure, it's not this, and it's fucking it up and it's watering it down. And it's like, well, how is, let's say, a 28th or 29th art that gets added into the matrix that fits within the guidelines of what Bruce and Dan used to create the original JKD? How does the 28th or 29th art water it down when the 25th or 26th art didn't water it down, made it better? Do you get what I mean? So there's this thing, and I don't want to spend too much time on that, but what happened was this. When I started training with Paul, I mean, I had a problem, and my problem was that I was almost murdered in a violent assault. So that's what drove me to Paul, was because he had a solution. But the solution that he had that I wanted was not Jeet Kune Do concepts. Now, I'm splitting hairs a bit because the Jeet Kune Do concepts was absolutely a part of it, but it wasn't the core of it. And what I need to do right now is now deviate and tell you another part of Paul's journey. One night, Paul is sitting at home and he gets a knock on his door. He opens the door and there's 2-3 guys in full military garb. And Paul's brain's like, what the fuck did I do? Like, this ain't the police. This is the fucking military showed up in my place. And, they ask him, can I come in? So he comes in. Or they come in, he lets them sit down and start talking. And long story short, these guys were connected to the Navy Special Warfare Group. And so what they were there to do was to offer Paul a contract. Really kind of almost no questions asked, pick up immediately and move your entire life to Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, where where Navy Special Warfare was based out of. And it was like yes or no kind of thing. And it was like he said yes, and he went, and Tom went with him. And next thing he knows is he's in Virginia, and he's now contracted to teach the Navy SEAL teams. And so imagine this, right? Because when Paul told me this, Paul said, "Listen, when they came to me, he goes, I was at a peak state. Like I thought my shit was tight. Like, I have this Jeet Kune Do concepts, I have this system, all this type of stuff." And he's like, it was like kind of like a really tight, focused beam of like, this is what I do. But then all of a sudden, he's got a new problem. Like now all of a sudden, you got Navy SEALs standing in front of you. And Navy SEALs have a different mindset, a different training process. They have a different perception of things, and they have different problems that they need to solve. Right now, hand-to-hand combat and edged and impact weapons for SEALs is by no means a major focus of their work. Obviously, people get that. But it still is a very important piece of that puzzle, right? So when he gets there, you start working with these SEALs and you start hearing their demands. Like, listen, when we're operational, when we're in theater, when we're doing these things, when these things and these things are happening, we need this, this, this. So guess what happens to what Paul is like this really tight system? But you got to remember, there's a massive difference between training civilians, even high-level athletes, but civilians, martial artists, athletes, that's very different than training professional warriors. I mean, at the tip of the spear. I mean, Navy Special Warfare is arguably second to none. I mean, there's lots of amazing special warfare groups out there, and they're right there with them, especially SEAL Team 6, which, was and is, and, at the tip of the spear. So one of the things that I found so interesting, he said that, do you know what happened to my process after 5 years? He goes, when I look back on it, like even as it was happening, I realized that I didn't have as tight a beam as I thought for Navy Special Warfare, for men, operating in extreme life and death situations under those types of conditions. So he goes, it turned out that what I had was a really good flashlight beam. But he goes, 5 years, 6 years of working with these elite groups, and guess what starts to happen? Your process evolves out of necessity, right? Because they will not tolerate anything less than shit that works. And guess what? When these guys go operational, you're getting biofeedback. This is not a bunch of martial artists, and then they go out, they leave the dojo, and they go to work the next day, and then they come back, and everyone's having an intellectual argument about what's better and what's not better. These guys were operational. So this stuff being combat tested, field tested. And so at the end of this process, he goes, we had a laser pointer process at the end of that. And that's what he calls rapid assault tactics. Not Jeet Kune Do concepts. He called it rapid assault tactics. Now, where did the rapid assault tactics come from? What's in its DNA? Jeet Kune Do concepts. But what I found interesting with this was that process of him refining things down, and then he created this other kind of system. And which is the rapid assault tactics. So when I went to him, what I wanted was the rapid assault tactics. Now, when I started training with them, so the way I look at it is this, and I became obsessed with learning the SEAL program, the Rapid Assault Tactics. And the Jeet Kune Do concepts was in that, but it was like a supplemental part of it, because the thing that the Jeet Kune Do concepts had that was invaluable was how they built attributes, how they trained people, the training methodology, how they used the weapons and all the different drill sets to build attributes. And so Paul, I mean, as brilliant as he is, recognized that where the SEALs really benefited was having this laser reduced system of how to, very aggressively neutralize life and death situations, which you'd think men in combat, SEAL teams, that's what they needed. And then to say, because again, a lot of SEALs, that's not their primary focus. These guys aren't born with hand-to-hand combat skills. I mean, they like everything else, they're trained. They're just different than everybody because they're highly motivated, their physical conditioning, their mindset, all of these other factors. But then he was able to introduce the attribute development that came from the Jeet Kune Do concept side of things, and he was able to just fucking turbocharge these guys. So when he figured out and he knew this, but Rapid Assault Tactics and the fuel, it's like that's the race car, that's the rocket ship, and the fuel that you put in it to power it is the Jeet Kune Do concept attribute of the self-perfection side of things. And that's where that synergistic combination came in. So now flash to when I started this. But you got to think about it this way. Paul wasn't teaching Navy SEALs the legalities of what they were doing with the Rapid Assault Tactical System. You're in a combat zone. They have their own rules of engagement. So he is not needed to teach them moral or legal application of this system. Do you get what I mean? They're dealing in this combat environment. So when I was training the system, it was street fighting concepts, because Paul just flipped it and said, listen, if a civilian's going to use rapid assault tactics, they're in a fight. And the thinking was more just like, yeah, you're in a fight. Some guy's trying to fucking kill you. Like, it's a street fight. So the term just was street fight. Now, listen, what you guys were talking about is that we always talked about when we face grievous bodily harm or death. But a street fight can evolve into that. You can have you can be in a bar with your girl and 3-4 guys fucking jump you and start, it can get bad. It can be lethal force necessary. But we just focused in on the Rapid Assault Tactical System. This is our strategy, tactics, and tools to fucking neutralize very aggressively, take a threat, and fucking neutralize the threat. Right in line with how SEALs needed to do it. We're just operating in two different theaters of environment. And so in those early years, true or false, every class that we had, we worked on the physical, strategies, tactics, and tools, and the mental, and the physiological, but only in support of those tools, like in support of the physical application of the Rapid Assault Tactical System. Like, do you guys remember that focus, and that's where it went?
100%.
Okay, so now stick with me then, right? What started to change? And maybe I'll ask this as a question. Can you guys, what started to change that forced us to evolve outside of just the straight up Rapid Assault Tactical System? Because we were never gonna streamline that system more than Paul did. And two things. One, because Paul's the guy's a savant. I mean, the guy understands this at a level most people never will. But that wasn't the only thing alone. That alone wasn't enough. The second thing was he had a test group. He had SEALs. Like, he had some of the most motivated, some of the world's greatest combat soldiers, and he had them giving biofeedback and field testing and biofeedback. Like, most people never get that opportunity. So that was just the perfect storm to create this very, very expedient and devastating process, the Rapid Assault Tactical System, the RAT system. So what was it that started to change? Do you guys know? Can you think of what that was?
I think it was our understanding of the context. So meaning just the realization that we're not in the same context as Navy SEALs, which is what you just said. or we're not on deployment in like an operational, situation. It's like we're day-to-day life. You know what I mean? So it's a very different context. And as we always say, context determines content. So that's at least part of it.
100%. Brad, you want to throw something down there?
Yeah, I have two things. One, I don't know if I'm going to hit the mark on. Another one, I don't know if I'm going to hit the mark on.
Excellent. Let's see.
But the first one is the landscape changing, right? The evolution of people's capacity for violence that we are facing, right? So I think that might have changed a little bit, and then I lost the second one that I didn't know if I was going to hit the mark on.
So it was going to miss then because you didn't need that. The universe took it away.
No, because it was jumping off of something that Dustin said, but now I don't know.
Okay, well, jump in because it'll pop back, I'm sure. Think of it this way. What you're saying is 100% right, but look at this. We don't have rules of engagement as dictated by the military the way the SEALs did.
Time.
And this, go ahead.
Sorry, it was time.
Time, okay.
The Navy SEALs, they didn't have time, right?
Yeah.
So, something that we always say, time is a very valuable thing. So because we aren't doing a 3-hour program like the Navy SEALs or however long it was, we have the luxury of time. Hopefully we have the luxury of time. We may not have the luxury of time, but with that, it allows us to, maybe explore some supporting elements as well.
Okay, perfect. And both those, that's correct. I see it this way though, right? We have this very intense physical program where it's like, it's an extremely violent way. I mean, it's violence. There's a threat in front of you, and you need to violently and quickly neutralize that threat. Again, you can see the correlation to SEAL's application. Now you're in a civilian world. Is that unjustified? Well, no, but it's not always justified, right? It's like, violence isn't always the answer, but when it is, it's the only fucking answer. But here's the thing. We started to recognize, as I was teaching this stuff, I started to recognize we got really good people coming in here, but these people are accountants and they're doctors and they're, construction workers and they're regular people, like you said, Dustin. They're living their fucking life. And what I realized was that, listen, they don't have a set of rules of engagement. Now, there's the criminal code, but most people, they don't understand what their rights actually are. And so, and I don't want to go too deep in that, but do you see how all of a sudden they're created a necessity? You see, our problem changed. All of a sudden, the problem of going, do you know when you are legally and morally authorized to engage with this type of action? Right? So SEALs have rules of engagement specific to their missions, and they understand those rules of engagement, and that dictates and drives their actions. So all of a sudden, we had a problem because, see, Paul wasn't teaching me the legal use of the Rapid Assault Tactical System. He was just teaching me the Rapid Assault Tactical System and saying, hey, listen, you're a good person. Use good moral judgment. Okay, but that water isn't always that clear, right? And you can end up in a lot of fucking legal trouble if that water's not clear, if you don't understand your rights, because the other side is you can become very emotionally driven. I mean, SEALs, when they get activated, they're in a hostile environment. You know what I mean? Now the landscape's changed a little bit now because warfare changed, and now all of a sudden you're fighting in urban environments where the enemy isn't instantaneously distinguishable from the civilians. So there's different things. But so with us, the legal had to change. Like, we had to actually start educating ourselves on the legal process, and then adding that into the Rapid Assault Tactical Program. So now you've got this legal component coming into it. Another thing that started to change was connected to what I just said. Not every confrontation is lethal force worthy. So this ties into the legalities, but go away from that for a second. Even if you understand your legal rights, you actually have to understand the sequencing of violence. You have to start understanding what types of aggression exist in the world. Right? The fact that you can have antisocial aggression, and then you can have predatory violence, and you can have asocial violence. Like, you got to start understanding all of this stuff. Another thing that came out of it, as I was training with Paul and going through things, we did a lot of work on self-regulation. But that work was almost intangible. It's like as you worked the physical rapid assault tactical system, the more you did that, the more you were forced to learn to control and regulate your physiology. You got to remember, no matter what skills you possess, those skills are being launched from the human weapon system. And we all have reactions to things. We're emotional creatures. We have biochemistry. And so you got to think, Navy SEALs, when they came to do the Rapid Assault Tactical Program, how much training did they have on mental toughness, on physical regulation, biochemical regulation? I mean, they had some of the best people in the world create some of the most challenging programs in the world to teach them how to fucking push through, how to fucking regulate, how to stay calm, how to breathe, how to do. I mean, SEALs, you could argue, not only did they become badass warriors, but they became master level fucking yogis, you know what I mean? Like in terms of self-regulation and centering themselves and all this type of shit. Yet, as civilians, here we are just teaching this rapid assault tactical program, and I realized that, like, if you don't actually step outside of that and say, it's not enough to just teach it and say, hey, if you work this long enough, you're going to get better at self-regulation. We actually had to create subcomponents, mini combat schools that dove deep into the human weapon system, how to build mental toughness, how to sharpen front sight focus, like SEALs had to. We're not going to do it to the same level because you're just not operating. You're just not at that level. You get what I mean? But it had to be done. And then how to understand the biochemistry and how to understand how the human system, how does life and death, violence, how do we react to that? And all of a sudden, there's more, but I'm just trying to get, all of a sudden you see a point in our evolution where we stumbled into Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman's work and on killing, on combat warrior mindset. How big of an impact, because you guys have been through all of these different iterations, how big an impact was it when I came across Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman and his work?
We spent years,
massive.
And it almost, it was that for us, it was a big missing link, right?
Yes.
Because it was something that we needed. And I remember how much digesting you did with that material.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't a month. It was years. It was years of digesting that and taking the application, functionalizing. You did exactly what we do with weaponizing.
Yeah.
You functionalize that material for the weaponization process, as we call it now, right? And that took years of study and exploration, almost, right? Mm-hmm. Even knowing that was a big catalyst for that change with what we were doing. But yeah, it tied a lot of, I know that we talked a lot about some of the things in that material without having the terminology, right? Because we say terminology matters. But then once we had that missing piece, it was like, oh shit, now we could actually work it. And now we could actually refine it and bring it and connect it to everything else that we're doing.
100%. Yeah. Dustin, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think listening to everything you've just been saying in the last 10 minutes or so, the one word that kind of hit me was like capacity, and just meaning people's capacity for violence. Going back to what you were saying about the RAP program and teaching Navy SEALs, it's like, yeah, they already have that. They already have that capability, that capacity to be violent, use violence as a tool. And so the RAP program, as much as it taught things like ruthlessness, which someone may not realize is very, very different. And again, that ruthlessness, that psychology that we learned in the RAT system was, I think, it was more for use in the actual physical part of the program.
Yes.
Whereas when you start to look at capacity for violence, that's all front end work. That's all stuff that happens before things go physical. And so I think that capacity for violence and just understanding that everybody's coming from a very different background with all kinds of different beliefs, values, paradigms from parents and friends and society and all that stuff. And it's like, there's a lot there that people have to unpack. It's not as simple as just, here's the physical program, so when you need it, you have it, you're set.
Yeah.
It's like, that's just way oversimplification.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, that's 100% correct, right? Like the SEALs had selection process. They had all this other workup. They have Hell Week. They have all these different things. And then when they're done that, and then they move to the finishing school. They still don't actually get assigned to their team. Like, I mean, a lot of people don't get that to get actually to a SEAL team and actually get your first deployment, and things could have changed. Obviously, I don't know, but back then, you could anywhere be 3 to 5 years before you actually got assigned to your first team because you specialize. So once you get through BUDS and you get through all this other stuff, then you actually go through specialized training, whether that's linguistics or fucking specializing in shooting, sniping, or whatever it happens to be. You go to different specialty schools. And then at the end of that, you get connected to your team. So 3, 4, 5 years before you actually can get your first, deployment. So they have all of these little, let's just call them the little combat schools, all of these little evolutions where they're taught how to be world-class divers, world-class skydivers, how to, all of this stuff. And so the Rapid Assault Tactical Program, you're getting these kind of end product dudes that are like, just show us what the most brutally efficient way is to take another human being out of fucking commission. That's it. That's all I give a fuck about. And so the JKD concepts gets laser focused down to rapid assault tactics. Then it's like, I was taught rapid assault tactics. And here's the thing. There was guys training at Paul that were after the Jeet Kune Do concepts. And so in the Jeet Kune Do concepts, you're doing the long range kickboxing. So you're out there moving around and you're intercepting, but you're using jabs, crosses, and savate kicks and Punenjokman kicks and all that kind of stuff. In the rapid assault tactics, you're not kickboxing. You imagine Navy SEALs in the middle of a conflict and they start kickboxing with the enemy. Like, that is as funny as me out with my kids and 2 or 3 guys are trying to fucking stab me to death, and I start moving around and kickboxing with these guys and doing savate kicks and jabs and crosses. And like, if you're a good enough athlete, I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying that's not what you would do. That's not the most streamlined, and that's not the most brutally efficient path. I'm just really trying to paint the picture of the rapid assault tactics. So then what I realized is that my application, I'm not teaching the Navy SEALs. I am I've got to teach military, got to teach really high-end operators that are military and law enforcement. I've had opportunities to do that, and I love that. But especially now, my mission now is men, good men that are just trying to live their lives and raise fucking families, and our city isn't safe. That's a problem. And that's a problem that I have a solution for. But I wanted people to understand that I started street fighting concepts. So it's just rapid assault tactics. Like, well, it's not a military application. It's a street fighting application now. And it's a lot of overkill for the street, for most street fighting situations, because they're anti-social aggression. But as we evolved and we had to start going, okay, Grossman's work, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, the on killing, all of the physiology, all of the psychology, all of that stuff. I mean, he's a former West Point psychology professor. He is, all this type of stuff. And I want to say, when I started going through his work, I was, like you said, I was poring over this stuff, processing this stuff. And to his credit, I did what Paul taught me to do. I reached out, made connections with him. I would email him letters of questions. Like, just questions. And here's the nuttiest fucking thing. This guy nominated for, a Pulitzer Prize. You know what I mean? Like, this guy emailed back with answers. And I started to build this relationship. Just an indirect, direct kind of relationship where I would email him and just like annoying, probably like some sort of crazed lunatic, but just, oh, I have a question about this. How does this apply to this? How does this apply to civilian? How would I do this? I'm thinking about this. And he would answer. And then that eventually turned into me attending his lectures and me bringing him in and getting to know him and building that relationship. But again, he became a very, very strong mentor, and his material impacted us because we created these subsets that people needed. And so then we had a guy like Barry Holland, who ex-JTF2, military police. I mean, this guy's got a whole expansive career on his own. And yet he specialized in not only was he good at all the physical, tactical, and all the other stuff, but he also was this wealth of knowledge when it came to the legal use of force here in Canada. And then that's where we got that part of the program from. And of course, we did this, and then the physiology. How many times have we had different experts, and we have a guy, one of the members trains us, and is like teaching us combat medic skills, right? And Keegan coming in, we just had him in not that long ago, and we just did another re-up on what your combat medical. So not CPR. What are the combat medical skills you need? Now it helped so that you can operate at the level of a paramedic. You're not as competent as that, but you get what I mean? You're not just first aider. You're getting way more detailed on what happens. Shot, stab. Can you imagine being in some sort of conflict? Shit happens. You're riding the LRT and some fuckers start shooting people and one of your kid catches a fucking bullet. Do you know how to treat a bullet wound? Do you know how to treat stab wounds on yourself, if you're capable, on other people, especially your family? See, SEALs have that training and they have combat medics in their unit. So this is why I don't advertise, even though I'm certified as a Jeet Kune Do concepts instructor and a Filipino martial art instructor. I don't advertise Jeet Kune Do because I'm not teaching Bruce Lee's art of Jeet Kune Do. Yet, what Bruce did and what Dan did is in the very DNA of what we do, undeniably. And you stand on the shoulder of these great men. But my focus was, I trained with Paul and I feel like my certification more is in the rapid assault tactical system with the Jeet Kune Do concepts as the self-perfection attribute, like it's the express elevator for taking a boy and teaching him to fight like a man and turning a man into a Superman, attribute-wise. But the rapid assault tactics is the most brutally efficient way to take out somebody when your life's on the line. But then we add in all these we've had to do all this other work over the past 30 years. And so now that's why we call it like Protect Our training, or the weaponizing process. Weaponize starts with the weaponized 16, but we weaponize men. We awaken the protector inside of them. But it is this combat school, but all focused on one thing. And that is, again, like if I just state it simply, our city, right? Like this is how I would say it to people today. I've been fortunate to be a combat educator for the past 30 years. Honored to work with a lot of personnel from both the Canadian military as well as our law enforcement first responders. But I am a husband, I am a father who lives, works, and is raising my two young daughters in this city. Right? In the city of Edmonton. And if I turn on the news, which I try not to do every night, if I turn on the news, probably just like me, you scream at the fucking TV. Why? Because it's another fucking example of some innocent person who's been fucking brutally assaulted or murdered by some fucking piece of shit. If you can't take your fucking family to Tim Hortons and ask some guy to not vape in your 3-year-old's face, and then be brutally murdered in front of them, or walk down the streets with your kids and have some fucking lunatic try to stab your kids and the dad jumps in front and gets stabbed himself in front of his kids, and that motherfucker's got a repeated history of violent offenses, drug addiction, and mental health issues, yet he's still fucking walking the streets, we have a serious fucking problem in this city. It's not okay. Right? A mother and daughter fucking stabbed to death at 5 o'clock outside of their school, like in their neighborhood. Like this city is far from fucking okay. And so that's a fucking problem. Much like in the military, if you're sending men into harm's way and you see a weak link where when shit gets close quarter or hand to hand and your men are dying, you solve that fucking problem. That's what Rapid Assault Tactics did. That's what they hired Paul to do. Right, which became the Navy Special Warfare Team 2 SEAL Combat Program. That became their standardized program. The first time in history they ever had a standardized program, and he's the founder of that. Him, of course, with working with the SEAL branches and stuff. And that's where our history comes from. But we've had to add to this system. We've had to make sure that we have the legal, make sure that we have the sequencing of violence. All of these, we have had to add all of these things to it, which now creates the Weaponized 16, the weaponization program, the protector training course we offer today. But I want people to understand that this is what it is now. There are men like us who fucking absolutely believe in their right to life, and they value the freedom that a man has to protect that life. And that's our entire mission. Create and train a group of men who believe like we, just enough's enough. It's time to take responsibility. I'm not farming it out anymore. It's not the police aren't going to help, all that shit. And so now when you really look at what we have and where it came from, like we're modeling what the SEALs did. And my sum up will be this. If you want to protect your fucking country, the military sends you to boot camp, right? You want to become a Navy SEAL? They send you to Bud School. If you want to serve and protect your community, you go through police recruit training. But if what you want is to protect your family from street level violence, then what you need to do is you need to get some protect art training. You need to get some weaponization. And now people go, oh, that's what you fuckers do. Yeah, man, the weaponization process is a fucking combat school. Like going through buds. You know what I mean? To become a SEAL. It's nowhere near as, you get what I mean. You just don't have, you can learn to fight like a Navy SEAL and not have to fucking go through Hell Week to do it. You know what I mean? But you got to understand it's this whole thing where you get, one of our clients, Nathan, said this to me the other day. He sent me a text at 5 o'clock in the morning this morning because he's thinking about this stuff, and he came up with something, a tagline that I fucking absolutely love. And he said, you know what this is? Like, not only do you learn the physical part of it, obviously, but he goes, what you're learning, what you're training and weaponizing, what happens when you get weaponized is you become a man who can legally protect one morally justified. And I just thought, that's fucking powerful, right? If your life's on the line, you can legally protect yourself, your fucking family, when you are morally right. And that says a lot, man, because that hit me in the beliefs. Like, I believe in the right to life. And I value the freedom for a man to defend his life. Not everybody does. And we do that with actions, not just fucking words, in being prepared. So the ability to legally protect when morally right. It's huge, right? And so I just thought it was such an interesting evolution. And I don't know, just where we've come from, where, this 1987 Street Fighter concept, where, and I'll just tie this in real quick at the end. You guys can throw your 2 cents down range here on this, but it starts with these Street Fighter video games where everybody gets into this. It's head to head. That's what it is to be a man. You fight head to head. And then you've got the UFCs, you've got the Gracie challenges where, for years, the Gracie Open Challenge, and guys with other martial arts would come to their gym, or they'd go into their gym and do what? They would have Street Fighter. They would just gamification, right? Which is all fine, right? It's all great. It's all separate. But again, people don't see what your military is doing. People don't see what the SEALs have to go through. They don't get the context of the environment they have to prepare and train for. And weaponization and what we're doing, our protector training, is really about, like, people don't really understand how fucking big of a problem we've got in our city. People should be fucking pissed off and terrified. Because it is like, I look at my daughter at 14. In a few years, she'll be going, and whether she drives or whether she has to jump on the LRT to get to university, you think I would let her ride the LRT the way it is right now in this city to get to the university? Or if she wanted to go down to fucking Rogers Place downtown to go see a concert or something like that, you think I'd let her ride the LRT? No, because I know what the fuck's going on in the LRT system. And yeah, thousands of people probably ride it every single day without problems. And there are hundreds of people every day that are facing vicious acts of violence, torment, brutality. And I've said this before, I don't give a fuck if it's a 1% chance that she becomes the target of violence. My daughter's worth more to me. I'm not taking that risk. Sorry. Not when I have other alternatives, And the best part is I'm educating her and weaponizing her so that she can become her own first responder, because that's what it's going to take. So there's kind of my rant on it and how it tied in. And like, you just got to ask yourself, like, you got to watch the gamification. And you can choose to play the game. You can choose to be sports entertained. You can choose it as a hobby, a recreation, a way of life. That's all great and that's all fine. But there is this other thing going on, where, again, create and train good men that, want to be part of the solution to this problem we got going in our city. So, I don't know. Sorry, guys, I've dominated a lot of this conversation, but feel free to throw anything downrange on any part of this, please.
Yeah, if I
I
was
think
you,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, based off the last thing you said there, Greg, about some people that maybe this isn't what they want. Maybe they like the sport, the art, the history of martial arts, whatever it is, and like that's fine. That's all good. Go do that, but don't be fooled and don't try to think it's something that it isn't. Do you know what I mean? Like see it for what it is and understand what problem you're actually solving or trying to solve. And if it's the same problem we're faced with, then make sure you have the appropriate training,
Yeah.
not the Street Fighter version. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, and for me, like I know we've talked a lot about owning the problem,
Yeah.
right? We've talked a lot about other people that are saying that they're a solution to a problem, but don't fully own that problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if we take the concepts that we shared even tonight about, special forces, the Navy SEALs, they have a problem that they face. And when they're doing their workup and when they're doing their specialization, they're getting the tools that they need and the training they need to handle and be part of the solution for that problem, right? So when we look at violence in our society, in our livelihoods, in our life, it's like, well, what tools do we need? What education do we need for that? It's not just kicks and punches. It's not our tools that we do anyway, but I'm just, as an example, it's like, what tools do we need as men to defend our families in the face of violent situations? And really answer that question. And if you're answering that question honestly, you know that there's more to it than just, again, kicks and punches. And you if you own that problem, it's like there has to be more to that solution. And that's what we've been talking about this whole time. And these 87 podcasts on weaponization,
Yeah.
because there is more to it. That if there wasn't anything more to it, why do we meet every Thursday night?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, like you said, it's threat recognition, it's the medical, it's the psychology, it's the combat physiology, it's. I mean, the list just keeps going.
You never send a Navy SEAL into deployment without the required,
Yeah.
skill sets and gear.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
people are walking around that all day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, and again, a lot of people they don't know, And now what's happened is like you guys were. It's such a cool thing because you guys were a part of the process. So you guys went on these deep dives into like the psychology work with Colonel Grossman, and then you guys went into like the legal, the deep dive into the legal with Barry, and Holland, and then you guys were here when we went into like the medical, the tactical medicine side of things and Keegan and different things, and then we've gone to these, and then all of these things have been brought back to where we have this distilled process, to where it's like, well, how do you impart this in the most expedient manner possible? Because that's very, very important. Because most of the men that come with us, they have maybe 1 day a week to train. And then they're doing a little bit at home. They're doing their supplemental homework. And then they're coming in and they're doing a deep dive in a very intense, rapid induction once a week. And then, so they don't have to sit through. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny, like, they'll have, even in the SEAL teams, they'll have civilian instructors come in because who are the greatest skydivers in the world? They're not military. They're private citizens that obsess and live a lifestyle where all they do is skydive. And the SEALs bring in the best of them. And those guys do what Paul did, which was create a rapid induction program where they get SEALs jumping at the level these guys are in a 10th of the time. Do you get what I mean? Because they just go, here's what you fucking need to know, because experience matters. They give them the right information. The experts understand the right information. They are wicked at teaching implementation, and then they customize to fit. And so you just get this distilled powerhouse version. You know what I mean? Of like, Kate, in a short period of time, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. Because it's like they take out all the fucking filler, which is why we have a saying, all killer, no filler. Because don't waste it with fucking bullshit. That's a waste of fucking time. A man's life or the life of his family is on the line, which is why we start everybody privately. because I assume your life's on the line. So one-on-one is the fastest way for me to rapidly introduce you and build that skill sets. That's how we do it. And the results just speak for themselves because it fucking works. So we say, work the process because the process works. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just such an interesting thing when we sit back from the street fighting concept days, you know what I mean? And this, and the whole man versus man and head to head, and it's just about the physical combat side of it, and just how, we recognized as an organization that we're too linear, we're too singular, we're too myopic, and that in and of itself, isn't what the world needs. It's not solving the problem in our urban environments, and so it's been a 30-year journey to balance that out and really come up with, a real thorough, expedient combat school. That process, the weaponization process, and just move people through that funnel and get them on the streets, operational, living their lives, fucking ready, weaponized. So that if they're there one day, when they see a mother and daughter and some fucking lunatic trying to murder these people, or some guy in some fucking Tim Hortons, or just riding the LRT to and from work, and you got these repeat violent offenders, drug addicts, and mental health, issues, where the system is just put them on the streets. It's literally like a zoo's, we're too full. The system's broken. Let some of the lions out. We can't keep them in these cages. We can't afford to feed them. You know what I mean? It's just like fucking, you got apex predators roaming the streets. And, what are you going to, you either live as a sheep going, they're not there. There's no lion, and hope that you're not the one, that finds himself on the X that day. But anyways, all right, guys. Again, I know I dominated a little bit the conversation. I apologize, but I just thought it was such a powerful, there's so many layers of this, of how we can view this conversation. So I hope people find some value in that. And again, I think that I'd ended just with more a direct ask. We don't, we do this because we genuinely want to educate people. So it's not a matter of we're on here every week trying to ask people for something. But again, if you're raising a family in this city, I would ask that you ask yourself what you're doing to combat this problem, because there's lots of problems in this city, and some people, their problem that they want to solve, that they're in a war against, is changing and bettering our educational system. Some people, it's building better roads. They're pissed off because there's too many potholes. I don't fucking know. And I'm glad there's people fighting all those things, because, hey, I'll take a better road. You know what I mean? I want my kids to have the best educational system possible. But we have a real fucking problem with violence in this city. Street level violence. Real problem. And the police response time is the police chief just come out again. It's getting slower. I said, I don't know, I was going to do a whole podcast on this, but for your top priority call, right, 7 minutes. Someone's got a weapon and is trying to murder you. 7 minutes is their gold standard for a response time. You ever been in a 7-minute life and death fight? It won't last 7 minutes. So that's why we often joke the police are the first to respond to the body. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock against police. You got an entire city to try to patrol. It's hard. But anyways, that's it. So do something, join it. Our whole mission, create and train a group of men. So if you value the right to life and you value a man's freedom to defend that life, weaponize, educate, give us a shout. All right. Love to be a part of that journey. So that's it. Dustin, Brad, thank you guys so much for your contributions. Thank you for being men that are willing to answer the call. And again, we'll be here every single Thursday, until I don't have a breath left, right? This is our mission. Okay. It's a passion and a purpose. This ain't ending anytime soon. So, all right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. Please like, share, comment. We always love your feedback. This is how we grow the channel, by people sharing, talking about it, connecting with us, one warrior at a time, one man at a time. Stay safe, stay weaponized. We're going to chat again soon, everybody. Thanks.